and for those that can't make this live. So this one tonight is on imposter syndrome. And the reason I did it on this one is because, like, I think literally every single one of my clients has it. It's so common. I've had it. It used to be called imposter phenomenon, but we tend to call it imposter syndrome now. And I just thought it'd be helpful to do this one. So let me introduce myself in just a moment, and I will talk you through it. So as always, I've got a couple of slides prepared, not many this time, but a few to share with you. So before we start, let me tell you, for those of you that don't know me, a little bit about myself and kind of why I'm here and what qualifies me to talk about imposter syndrome. Well, first of all, I've got some good experience in imposter syndrome because I'm the biggest imposter here. So that qualifies me, I think. But my name's Chris Finn. I worked as an assistant vice president in the corporate world for nearly 10 years. Before I kind of really got obsessed with how to get the best from people. I was in my work managing a couple of hundred people, and I was just fascinated why some of them would perform really well and some of them just didn't, even though the conditions for them were the same. So I got really interested in mindset. And so I decided to retrain in psychology for 7 years. And I got very senior in that position. I worked my way up to a senior lecturer on a psychology master's program. But I then retrained as a coach, and now I'm a full-time entrepreneur. And most of my clients, not all of them, but most of them are fellow entrepreneurs, leaders, other coaches, but other just ambitious people who want the best from themselves and their life. And when I say ambitious, I might mean a different kind of ambitious to what you might think of, because I don't mean ambitious in that, you're necessarily career driven, but ambitious in the sense that you want more from yourself. You want more from your life. And that's what I mean when I say ambitious. I'm ambitious in that I just want to squeeze every last little bit out of life. And most of my clients at least want to get more for themselves. And that's what I mean when I say ambitious. And what we're going to do today is have a look at imposter syndrome. But the work that I do these days is we go way beyond tools and techniques. I used to use tools and techniques all the time in psychology. And personally, I found them very limiting because they often, not always, but often just mask the root cause of why we've got the problem. So for example, I used to work a lot with mental health and for example, anxiety. And when someone gives you a tool or technique to manage anxiety, then you're doing just that. You're managing anxiety, and you're not getting to actually the root cause of why you've got anxiety. And so one of the main reasons I retrained as a coach, because coaching gets to the root cause. We go on a real deep dive and look at how you can, and today specifically, we're looking at how you can transform your imposter syndrome, your self-doubt and anxiety, and create real confidence, not the kind of fake confidence that we get, which is why we experience imposter syndrome. So let's look at how we're going to do that today. Okay, and if there's any questions at all, just let me know. But we're going to look at something called blind spots, and this is how we really overcome imposter syndrome. So everyone probably knows what a blind spot is. It's when you reverse the car into something that you didn't see, and then after you've reversed it in it, then you know it's there. Or it's like when you're looking in the cupboard for something and you can't see it, it's there, and then you get your partner to come and they say it's right there, right in front of you. It's a blind spot, you can't see it. But we all have our own blind spots as well. We all do. And here's the way I describe blind spots, is you know what you know, okay? You know what you know. So if you're working in a particular field, you know that particular field and you can explain it to people. But you also know what you don't know. So for example, probably none of us on here, I'd imagine, doesn't know a huge amount about quantum physics. And I know that I don't know a huge amount about quantum physics, so I'm not going to pretend. But a blind spot is when you don't know what you don't know. Let me say that again. You don't know what you don't know. And that's what a blind spot is. So we're going to be looking today at the areas of your life that are hidden from your own view. What is just happening for you that is keeping you stuck. And your blind spots are the reason that you underperform, that you get in your own way, and you might even self-sabotage. So what you can approach this workshop today in a couple of different ways. And I've said this to the last group that I led. You can turn up today and you can watch this like you would watch Netflix. It's totally up to you. Okay. Maybe you'll get something from it. Or you can watch this today like this is a live coaching session with a real life coach that's here to help you break free. Okay. So it's up to you. I've led many workshops, and we get both. We get some people on here that would just watch this like it's Netflix, and you won't really get much from it. You won't interact. You might have your cameras off. You won't ask any questions, and you'll be on your phone and you doze off from time to time. Okay, it's up to you. You can turn up and you can give this 100%, just as I'm going to give this 100%. Those that give it 100% will experience a shift today, probably even a transformation. So you can decide right now which one you're going to be. Okay, so let's have a look at what imposter syndrome actually is. Okay, so chances are you have some idea already, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. But let's have a look in, you can either pop this in the chat box, or you can just take yourself off mute and shout out what imposter syndrome looks like for you personally. How does it show up? What does it look like in your mind? What feelings do you get? What thoughts go through your mind? In other words, why are you here? Why are you taking an hour and a half out of your life to come on this workshop? What does imposter syndrome look like for you? And you can pop it in the chat box, or you can just take yourself off mute and shout it out. Why are you here tonight? What does imposter syndrome look like for you personally? Because, by the way, they reckon that up to 85% of people have it. So that's most of us. 85% of people experience imposter syndrome. Yeah, doubt, definitely. It's the key thing. Keep it coming, you guys. You can come off mute as well.
It's a bodily felt experience.
A bodily felt experience. What if you had to label it? What would you label it, John?
A few years ago, I would just say fear.
Yeah, that's what I call it.
Kind of trauma, possibly, that's been reignited, I think, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, John's not wrong. Whether we call it fear, anxiety, nerves, it's all the same thing. Yeah. So self-doubt, doubt, yeah, worrying about things in my life, especially work. Yeah. Katie said it's a front. Yeah, like a front, kind of almost like you're pretending. Yeah. Lacking confidence. Yeah. All of that. I mean, you guys know what it is. So we're not going to hang out here too long, because that'd be a waste of your time. Yeah, not believing I did it. Yeah. It's basically like feeling like a fake, feeling like a fraud, feeling like you're kind of hiding something or pretending, right? And it's a horrible feeling. It's a horrible. I mean, I know it really well. I had it when I was an assistant vice president. I had it when I was a trainee psychologist. I had it when I was a psychologist. I certainly had it when I was a lecturer. The way it looked for me when I was a lecturer was, what on earth are they doing getting me to lecture these guys? What they've got it wrong. They've made a massive mistake, and I'm going to get found out. And it's sort of like, sometimes it really carries on, doesn't it? I mean, I never got found out, but I was always waiting for it. Okay, so I've got a particular take on imposter syndrome, and as with all these trainings that I do, all these workshops I do, I'm never going to stand here and say that this is the only perspective. I'm never going to stand here and say that this is the correct or the right perspective. This is just my perspective. And my work, literally the way I think about my work is sharing my perspective. So I'm going to share with you how I understand imposter syndrome. I'm going to share with you what's helped me. And if you like it, great. And if you don't, you can challenge me and you can ask questions to clarify, and you can take yourself off mute at any time to do so. But I'm just going to share with you how I look at this. So let's share this slide with you. So the way that I understand imposter syndrome is it's not actually a confidence problem. Okay. The thing is imposter syndrome usually comes after taking action. Okay. It's after we've taken action and we've got to somewhere that we experience imposter syndrome. It's a mixture of both self-doubt and fear. And again, when I say fear, you can replace it with the word anxiety. nervousness, feeling on edge, anything like that. And the fear really is a fear of being found out, discovered as a fraud or a fake. And it's almost always present when starting something new, whether it's a new job or you're becoming a parent for the first time, because parents have it as well. When I first became a dad, I thought that I was a fake dad. But we're mainly looking at how this shows up in work today, how this shows up in work or business and or occupation. Now, most of the time, imposter syndrome will go after a time, most of the time. So the reason I say it's not a confidence issue is because the way I see this is that you can only have imposter syndrome when you've stepped outside of your comfort zone. Yeah, does that make sense? Like, it's when you step outside of your comfort zone and you pursue something that's important to you that you experience imposter syndrome. And, I don't know if we can perhaps all think of someone that we know or have heard of, or imagine someone that has got quite a small life, quite a small comfort zone. I can think of someone, and they don't step outside of their comfort zone very much at all. And so for that reason, they don't experience imposter syndrome. They don't experience the fear and the self-doubt because they're always in their comfort zone. So my take, and again, this is just my take, Chris Finn's take, is that the reason someone would have imposter syndrome is that they've already stepped outside of their comfort zone and they've already pursued something that they want to go after. And it's in that pursuit that you're now experiencing the self-doubt and the fear after taking action. That's not the only time. I mean, sometimes will people experience imposter syndrome at the thought of stepping outside of their comfort zone and doing something. And they will give that as the reason. Well, the reason I didn't go for that promotion or the reason I didn't go for that job is because then I would feel like an imposter. So it's the thought of doing it that can kind of be labeled as imposter syndrome as well. But that's my take. And so that's the stance that I'm going to come at this from today, that actually everyone watching this, whether it's live or recorded, has probably already taken some action, or at least you're considering action. That's the stance I'm taking. So any thoughts or questions or challenges on that, feel free to just give me a wave and you can come off mute and fire away. I love the interaction. It really helps you guys get the best from this. So any thoughts from you guys before we move on?
I can share.
Sorry.
Oh, Agatha, I think you go first. Yeah.
No, Chris, I was just going to say I can totally relate to what you've just shared there with regards to how it happens when you step out of that comfort zone. Personal experience when I got this job, I got the job and then I wanted to run a mile. I didn't want it.
Yeah, after you got it, right?
Exactly. I got it. I said,
yeah.
I can't do this. I said, I can't.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You already had some confidence to kind of take the steps to get that job. Is that the problem with imposter syndrome is in the phrase, you've got to fake it until you make it. And I've discovered this time and time again. So fake it till you make it. I'm not saying it's all bad. There's a good side to it because it does lead you to taking action. Okay. When you fake it until you make it, it means that you're an action-orientated person. It will give you a reason to do what you want to do. So there is wisdom behind it. So even though you feel like you're nervous, you're anxious, you're not sure if you can do it, the faking it till you make it makes you take action. Now, most of the time, that's an okay thing to do. It's even a good thing to do, because actually that's how we get confident. We get confident by taking action. The alternative to not taking action is staying in your comfort zone. And this is what I mean when I say that you guys are ambitious, because you're either not in your comfort zone, otherwise you would just be watching Netflix, or you're at least thinking of stepping outside your comfort zone and you're experiencing that self-doubt and that fear. Okay. So I admire you for that. You know, anyone with imposter syndrome, I think, great. I love that you've stepped outside of your comfort zone and you're doing something that you're interested in or that you're passionate about. But the problem is in the faking it part, okay? And the downside is that you guys have probably all discovered for yourself is that if we consistently go through life faking it, then you're always going to feel like a fake, like a fraud, like an imposter. Now, here's the key thing I want you to take away from this. And this is either going to sound really obvious or it's going to sound new to you, but you're literally being an imposter because you're faking it. That's why you fear getting found out. It's the actual faking it that leads to the imposter syndrome. Now, some of you are nodding and laughing, so I can see that you're getting it. Now, if you're not getting it, don't worry, because you will by the end of this workshop. So just have a brief look for yourself and see. Think about a time when you've faked something. Okay. What exactly did you fake? What did you hide? What did you lie about? What did you pretend? And what experience did that bring up in you? How did you feel emotionally? What did you fear? What went through your mind? Now, if you have a memory come up, you'll be able to see for yourself that this itself is the experience of imposter syndrome. You experience imposter syndrome when you are acting like an imposter, when you're faking it. Okay? So this is why I don't experience imposter syndrome anymore, because I don't hide anything anymore. So I run a 12-week group coaching session, and I ran a session last night. Some of you are on here, and those that are on here know that last night I turned up and I said, you know what, I'm not feeling it today. I'm not feeling on my A game. There's been a health scare in the family. And I told them that I was considering postponing the session. And because that was completely authentic, completely true, there was no imposter there. There was no fake. There was no fraud. The alternative would have been, and this is what I would have done in the old days, is turned up and pretended that everything was okay. And people would have sensed perhaps that there's something off. And I would have experienced that, and other people would have experienced that. And that's when you start to feel like an imposter, when you're trying to hide something or pretend something. Likewise, if I was to turn up to this and say, just so you guys know, I'm the best coach in the world, and this is going to be a groundbreaking session, your minds are going to be blown. There's an inauthenticity there. Okay. However, when I turn up and just say, look, I'm going to share my perspective with you, and that's all I'm going to do. And if it's powerful, great. And if it's not, no problem. Then that's real, that's authentic. So there's no imposter, there's no trying to hide anything or pretend anything. So have a look for yourself where you pretend, where you lie, where you hold something back, basically where you're inauthentic. Where in your performance, where in your life are you faking it? Because it's the faking it that leads to you being an imposter. It's so obvious now that you see this, right? You wonder why you have imposter syndrome. It's because you're acting like it.
Okay.
Let's have a look. And then Katie's written in the chat box, I overcompensate with my boss. Okay, so we've had a look for ourselves. We're going to take a deeper dive at this in a minute. But now what I want you to consider is, why do you have to fake it? Why do you need to fake it to take action? Why can't you take action without the faking it? Without the pretending, without the hiding, without the lying? When actually you can probably see for yourself that it's the faking it that leads to the imposter syndrome.
I think it's because we're frightened of the reaction of others to us if we are true, or we open up and admit that maybe we're not good at something. I mean, I'll give you an example. For instance, if something goes wrong with the computer and you've got to get internal IT, and they're going, oh, do this, go over there, do this, do that, move this, and I don't know what on earth they're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think to myself afterwards, what are they thinking after when they realise I can't manage myself the way around a computer?
Yeah.
And then they, you know, and I'm worried that what are they going to say, and where's that going to leave me if other people find out about it?
Exactly. Exactly, Janet. Because you're not comfortable saying, look, I don't understand this, you're hiding that because you're scared of how that's going to look, right?
Yeah.
And it's in that hiding that leads you to feeling like an imposter. Because the alternative would be saying, look, I don't get this, you guys. Can you explain this to me? And then, yeah, you might feel silly for a second, but then you're not feeling like an imposter. Most people learn that there's no such thing as a stupid question when they ask what they think is a stupid question. So it's in this hiding that's what's maintaining the imposter syndrome. So what I'm going to invite you all to consider is that you are all hiding something, and that's why you have imposter syndrome. You're all overcompensating and or hiding something, and that's what's maintaining your imposter syndrome. And you're just going to discover that for yourself today, if you'd like to. So why would we want to do this? Well, actually, performance is linked to authenticity. Harvard Business Review found that when entrepreneurs and leaders were authentic and genuine in their speeches, they were over 3 times more likely to be chosen for their pitch. So just you being yourself authentically means that you're 3 times more likely to be successful than when you try to guess what the other person wants to hear, Janet. Now, by the way, guys, we literally almost all do this. Again, up to 85% of people experience imposter syndrome. And here's why. We're scared what other people will think. Janet's literally just articulated it. Janet's going to be literally running this workshop in the future. She's just articulated why we have imposter syndrome. We're scared. We're scared of looking bad. We are. And here's where it comes from. A lot of people I found can relate to this. So I know me and lots of friends that at school would put our hands up in class to ask a question, and you'd be giggled at, right? Like this happens to almost everyone. Who has this happened to? You've put in school, you've put your hand up and you've asked a question, you'd be laughed at. Just give me a wave if this has happened to you. Yeah, almost everyone, literally. There's like 2 people that haven't waved, right? So that is what we call a mild trauma. And I mean a mild trauma with a small t. It hurts, it embarrasses us, it's scary. And so we make a decision in that moment, whether we're conscious of it or not. I'm never going to do that again. And people don't. People will now live their whole lives not asking questions. And honestly, and you guys in my 12-week program know this, but there literally is no such thing as a stupid question. But you know that yourselves because you've experienced it in the coaching that we've done together. Okay, so if we continue to fake it and try to prove ourselves, then this actually erodes our confidence. Now, you'll be able to see for yourself that the amount that you fake it directly correlates with the feeling of imposter syndrome. So the more you fake it, the more you feel like an imposter. The less you fake it, the more confident you feel. So again, we're going to go way beyond tools and techniques, and we're going to look at the root cause of this. So the root cause of imposter syndrome comes from either an act of inauthenticity or an overcompensation or overcompensations, or both. Everyone is doing one or 2 of these, or both. It's whatever you do that's inauthentic, or it's whatever you do when you compensate for a limiting belief. And when you do that, you feel like a fraud. And what happens is you actually, by doing these things, you fail to discover that you can make it without doing that. In other words, you fail to discover that you can perform, that you can be successful without doing that. Now, the thing is that this will be a blind spot for you. You probably, some of you already seen this, I can tell, but most of you won't see this for yourself unless you take a fresh look now and discover for yourself where you started faking it or overcompensating. So it's whatever you do to overcompensate for your perceived incompetency. And it is a perceived, self-perceived incompetency. Now, basically, there was a time, and it is most likely for most of us, it was unconscious, when you started overcompensating in some way. And because of this compensation, you experience a higher level of fear of negative evaluation, so criticism, than those people who are just playing to their strengths. Because of the way this works, you never actually got to freely explore your own strengths and your skills, your natural talents and gifts. Because without consciously knowing it, when you decided to compensate, you compared yourself to someone else. Like John sharing that he compared himself to other people and he said, I'm different, I'm an outsider. It's in that comparison that we create ourselves to be an imposter in that comparison. And this is exactly what erodes your true confidence. Now, again, for most of you, this will be a blind spot. You won't know that you're doing this. Again, you don't know what you don't know. A lot of famous comedians actually admit that they were just overcompensating for not fitting in socially. So they developed their talents at getting funny. Darren Brown, the famous mentalist, he freely speaks about in his autobiography that he just thought he was utterly boring. And so he learned magic and mentalism to impress people as an overcompensation for being boring. My example, because I've obviously done this process that you guys are going to go through in a minute, was I remember being at first school and there was this kid that I thought was very, very intelligent. He just seemed to find things really, really easy. Now, I was then comparing myself to him. You've all done this too. Maybe you'll know that you've done this and maybe you won't, but you're going to discover for yourself in a minute. It's in that comparison that we create ourselves to be an imposter. Because in that moment, I decided that I'm not intelligent. I'm never going to be as good as him. And so I had to overcompensate by working harder. Now, a couple of you have already said this. John and Pat, you've overcompensated by working harder. So my decision was, right, the way that I'm going to get through life is I'm going to work harder than anyone else. So I'd be the first one in the office. I'd be the last one out. I'd say yes to everything. And then I got burnt out. And then it kept on happening. I kept on getting burnt out because it was a blind spot. I didn't see fully that I was doing this to myself. And I didn't get to discover that actually I am quite intelligent, because I decided when I was about 6 years old that I wasn't, and I forgot that that belief wasn't true. So you guys have all done this as well, probably unconsciously, where you actually never got to discover your own skills, your strengths, your natural talents, your gifts, because you probably, out of your awareness, compared yourself to someone else and made a decision about how you were going to get through life, which, again, for some of you is working hard. A lot of you can relate to my example. And the thing that you and some others in the group coaching program that we run will have heard me say this, but you know, when we make decisions about ourselves, when we're 6, 7, 8, maybe at the most, we don't even realize that that decision stays with us sometimes for the rest of our lives. And like I've said, like, I don't want a 6-year-old making decisions for me. Yet there's a 6-year-old on some level running some of our lives. Honestly, there really is. Like, we make these decisions about ourselves when we're so young, when we don't have all the relevant information available to us. And then we go through life thinking that that's true without re-examining it, because we don't look, because no one does this work. So this is about kind of going back to a time when you made a decision about yourself and just re-exploring it and re-examining it and seeing if it's true. Okay, before we move on, any thoughts, any questions, any sharing from anyone. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a process. And this is the interactive part. So again, if you want to kind of continue watching this like it's on Netflix, I promise you, you're going to get absolutely nothing from this. But if you want to go through this process in the private of your own homes and with a bit of paper, or just kind of go through it, then this has the potential to really transform your life. And I've done this exercise many, many, many times, and I've shortened it as best as I can to fit it into this short workshop. But I still believe that you're going to get something from this. So for those of you that would like to kind of explore this for yourself and dissolve your imposter syndrome, let's have a look. So where are you faking it? The invitation right now is to think of a memory that you have where you looked at someone that you thought was doing well in life. You could have been 5, 6, 7, 13, 19, 21. Chances are, as soon as I've said this, a memory's already popped up. If it hasn't, just have a look. Basically, it's when you saw someone and they were performing well. They were making it. They were successful. It could have been in sports. It could have been academically. It could have been socially. It could have been your older brother, younger sister. Could have been your dad. Could have been absolutely anyone. But you looked at them and you thought, they're finding this easy. They're doing really well. Take a moment to do that. And again, if you don't do this, you're not going to get anything. This is an actual exercise that you need to go through to transform your imposter syndrome. And by the way, there might be a couple of things. You might not have just thought one thing, but these are what we call, in my world at least, our limiting beliefs. This is something that we decided about ourselves almost certainly when we were a child with an undeveloped brain. We make a decision about ourselves and then we carry it around for 2, 3, 4 decades, maybe more, without ever re-looking at this and re-examining it and seeing if it was even true in the first place. Most of the time, when you ask someone what's the worst thing that's ever happened to them, what they tell you is they don't actually describe the situation, they describe a thought. They describe a limiting belief. The worst part about it is it meant this about me. And this is what's keeping your imposter syndrome going. Next part of this, and again, it's going to be really helpful for you if you write this down. How did you compensate in that moment? And subsequently, what did you do differently? What did you decide to do as a way to cope? Now, some of you have already got this. I'm going to work harder. I'm not going to ask questions, Janet. I'm not going to sort of say that I don't know how to do this. Some people will copy someone else's work. I used to do that in school as often as I could, because I'd decided that I'm stupid, so I'm going to copy someone else's work. Did you pretend that you knew it all? Did you start hiding when you didn't know the answer? Did you stop asking questions in class? Everyone that waved earlier probably have stopped asking questions. Did you start avoiding certain situations, Agatha? Did you try and be perfect, John? Did you hide your mistakes? Did you get angry when something went wrong or you made a mistake? What did you do to compensate? And what was it a compensation for? That's the key bit. That was step 2, I believe. What had you decided about yourself? Why were you even having to compensate, in other words? And so because you decided that you're useless, you overcompensated in various different ways, becoming funny, excelling at sports.
Yes.
But what you're going to begin to see is that because that overcompensation was based on a limiting belief, a perceived thought and feeling of inadequacy,
yeah,
it actually reinforces the limiting belief.
Absolutely.
It keeps you stuck, it keeps you trapped, it keeps you feeling like you're hiding something. And the thing that would be quite nice for you to see today is that that's not true. You decided it when you were a kid. And kids, they don't make the best decisions. I mean, my son wants to eat chocolate all day, every day. I don't let him because I make better decisions for him. But he doesn't agree with me. But we make decisions about ourselves when we're kids, and then we keep hold of them for most of our lives, unless you do this work. Okay, are we ready to move on to step 4? Has anyone got any questions or anything they'd like to share? So what you need to discover for yourself, and there's no point in me telling you this, have a look for yourself, that all of these things you've just written down, these actions, these inactions, if it's procrastination or avoidance, all these behaviors are a reinforcing behavior for a limiting belief that you decided about yourself in step number 2 that we explored. Now, here's the thing that you really need to get. Because your compensation is based on a feeling and a decision of inadequacy or incompetence for who or what you could never be, in other words, I'm not as good as them, I'm not as smart as them, I'm not as academic as them. Any behavior that you do because of that decision that you made reinforces the belief that you developed that you in some way couldn't be successful, couldn't make it. Now, I know that's a long, long sentence, but one thing that I'm not very good at is grammar, and I'm not going to try and fake that. So in other words, because you were comparing yourself with someone else, you never got to freely explore your own strengths, your skills, your natural talents and gifts, because you were comparing yourself to someone else, and then you based your decision on what you couldn't do, not what you could do. Great. And I can see some of you nodding. Does anyone have any questions about that? Because it's a really key part of this process. What can you now stop hiding or pretending? In other words, how can you stop faking it? And how can you be authentic instead? What do you need to do to discover for yourself that you're not an imposter? That you're not a fraud, that you're not a fake? Or said another way, how can you align your thinking and your actions and take away the faking part? Sometimes the inauthenticity is in you not owning what you've done to get where you are. In other words, you're not making the connection between your skills or accomplishments and your success. And I'll let you read that again if you so like to. Okay. So what you're basically doing now is writing down how you can stop overcompensating, how you can stop hiding and being inauthentic. Because you've written down a list of reinforcing behaviors of overcompensations. So it's kind of like now deciding whether or not you're still going to do those or not, when you can perhaps see for yourself that that's what's maintaining your imposter syndrome. Working harder than everyone else is maintaining your imposter syndrome because you're not learning that you don't have to do that. Again, I think we'll come back to the fact this is just a slightly different stance for what you're experiencing, because what you're experiencing, like you said, is a little bit of worry, anxiety about, you know, what people think and things. And yeah, this is a different viewpoint, but it sounds like you're getting something from it. So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And thanks for sharing. And again, you know, you might come across some other training or reading on imposter syndrome and it takes a different perspective. Like, I'm not trying to be kind of right about this, but this is what I found particularly helpful for persistent imposter syndrome, which is different to what you've got. I wouldn't diagnose you with imposter syndrome, basically.
Yeah.
Which is nice. You're not one of the 85%. So we're going to look at now about being authentic and performance. So this is really, you know, the only really next thing to kind of do, to really kind of take this further, is to own what you're good at, own what you're bad at, own your achievements and own your successes. Share your doubts and your fears. When you share your doubts and your fears, you're being real, you're being authentic, you're not hiding anything. And so there's nothing to get found out about. You're not being an imposter, you're not faking it, you're not acting. And this is what transformed for me. When I used to teach or coach or do any kind of training, I would be faking it all the time because I'd be hiding my anxiety, I'd be hiding my fears, I'd be hiding the bits I'm not good at. And when I stopped hiding that, that's when I actually got confident, because I would say to people, look, I'm not particularly good at explaining this next bit, but I'm going to give it a go. Or I'm not particularly good at grammar, or I'm not feeling on my A game tonight. And I would share that and everything would be okay. And I'd realized that I didn't have to fake it to make it. I could make it without faking it, and I could just be myself. And that's what leads to true confidence, real confidence, not this fake confidence that faking it till you make it creates. I think the faking it till you make it is great for a short time if it leads you to taking action. But if you continue to fake something and overcompensate, you're going to keep having imposter syndrome. Most people with imposter syndrome focus on their limiting beliefs. So focus on the results that you get. Eliminate any inauthenticities, eliminate any faking it, eliminate any time that you're just hiding something, pretending something. If you want to not feel imposter syndrome, you want to develop real confidence, you're going to have to stop faking it. And just reduce any compensatory behaviors, any reinforcing behaviors. And that's how you get real confidence. In my experience, and this is my personal experience and what I've got from working with literally thousands of people, is that most of our fears never come true. Because at the moment, what you're reacting to is an assumption, it's a preconception, it's an idea. And I'm not saying it's not going to come true, but you don't know until you test it out. But this is why this technique, this process develops what I call real confidence, because either you'll do this and it will go well and it's going to develop confidence, or you'll do it and it won't go well, but you'll discover that you're okay and it still creates confidence. And this is what most people don't see. They hold themselves back from these fears because they think that they won't be okay or it won't go well. But even if it doesn't go well, you'll still be okay. So it's an opportunity to develop real confidence. And I'm not saying it's easy, and most people won't do it, but that's okay. I mean, I don't work with most people. I work with these ambitious people that want more from their lives. So you don't have to do any of this. And I think what this exposes is a fear, the next fear that you've got, which is, you know, perhaps similar to a lot of other people's, I'd imagine. But the way, if you wanted to fully overcome this, is to test out. And I always say start with the easiest personal people, always. Okay, so no questions. What have you guys seen for yourselves through this process that we've just gone through? Like I say, it's a shortened process. What have you discovered for yourself? Those that have kind of taken the steps and gone through it, what have you seen? And just give me a wave and then you can share. I think like you've seen something there for yourself, Nina, and it reminds me of a friend of mine, my best friend actually. He went for a job recently. He's a clinical psychologist, and he went for a job and he wasn't nervous because he wasn't that bothered. And one of the bits of feedback he got when he didn't get offered the job was they didn't think that he wanted it very much. He wasn't excited, he wasn't nervous. They literally didn't feel it. Yeah. Interviewers love it when you say, sorry, I'm just really nervous. I really want this job. They love it. And so then you're being authentic. You're sharing why you're hot. You know, you're sharing that you're a bit flustered and flapping around if it's a job you really, really want. People love authenticity. It's very attractive. It's very likable. People trust you when you're authentic. When you're trying to hide something, it creates distrust. People sense it on so many levels. And this is really about freeing you up so you can be whoever you want to be. Because you perhaps have taken from this that we make these decisions about ourselves often when we're kids, when we're forming what we call our personality. That's why it's called our formative years. And most people don't then retake a look at who we think we are. But who we think we are limits us. And we get stuck and we self-sabotage. And we want more for ourselves, but we don't think we can get it because of how we're seeing ourselves.